Does anyone know, since we have a couple minutes, here's a contest. Does anyone know the code name for SQL Server 2008 R2? Because it is not released yet. It is still in beta. It will be released next month. Right? So just to be clear, there's SQL Server 2008 that shipped in 2008. And now we have a new version of SQL Server called SQL Server 2008 R2. Why didn't they name it SQL Server 2010? Because they're stupid, in my opinion. Anyone from Microsoft in the room? Yes. Can you relay that feedback back to the team, please? And tell them someone else said it. Vinod Kumar said it. I didn't say it. He could take it. He could take it. I think he's actually on the team. So does anyone know the code name? And this guy can't answer since he's from Microsoft. Does anyone know the code name for SQL Server 2008? They deviated from their normal code name scheme, which is U.S. national parks, like Yukon and Shiloh. Does anyone know the code name? Madison. No, but good guess. You get a prize just for guessing. You win an iPhone, which I don't have. You win a Windows 7 mobile phone, whatever they call it. They need a new name for that. Tell them that too, Mr. Microsoft. Who thinks, no, it should be called something cool, like the Zune phone, or like, no Microsoft, why is Silverlight so cool? Because it's a real name, as opposed to Microsoft Ajax Framework 1.3, Special Edition, Service Pack 1. Yeah, or Silverlight. All right. It's the name of a mountain. Technically, it's a volcano in Africa. No guesses? Is that a guess? Was that you raising? No. Come on. Someone guess. You can Google it. Kilimanjaro. You win a prize. You win an iPhone paid by the Microsoft guy. So here is a picture of me on top of Mount Kilimanjaro, the tallest mountain in Africa. 6,000, I don't know the exact number. Let's just say 6,200 meters. Notice how cold it is. So we can all pretend we're on top of Kilimanjaro right now, except that there's a lot less oxygen in the air, but it'll be cooler. So, yeah, that's me and my friend. Actually, at TechEd USA last year, that guy, his name is Richard Campbell. I don't know if you ever heard of .NET Rocks. He's the host. And the other guy with the mouth open is me. And I'm saying, it's cold. Take the picture. And we did the keynote at the data track at TechEd. And we were talking about SQL Server 2008, not Kilimanjaro, which is R2. So we said, speaking of Kilimanjaro, and this was our bio slide. So it looks cold. I don't know what I was thinking. Are we ready to start? Can I start now? No one else is coming, right? Should we just start? I have 2 minutes. I guess we have to wait 2 more minutes. Does anyone have any questions for my other session? I can't entertain the crowd that much longer. I run out of material. I don't know who that person is in my picture. I should have cropped them out. I just noticed that now for the first time. This is very high. It was 50% less oxygen in the air. I could tell you I only climbed it because I thought it would be really cool to have a picture on top of Kilimanjaro at the session. So hopefully the next version of SQL Server will be named like Bali or Phuket or Goa or some nice beach resort. Can you tell them that too, Mr. Microsoft? Just tell them like Steve said, because then I could take a picture of me at a beach resort. How about just, I don't know, Disneyland. They can call it Disneyland. I can just go to Disneyland or something. Or the Taj. I go to the Taj Mahal. I have a picture of me at the Taj Mahal. All right, that's enough for that. Yeah, we don't need to know about me. Ah, goodness. I promise you this is the only slide you're going to see today at this session, since you already saw the Kilimanjaro slide. The rest is demo. Demo until we get bored. We demo until the AC is too cold. So I'm here with my colleagues, and they're from Europe. and never gets really that warm where they live in Bulgaria, in Eastern Europe. And they've been complaining about the heat. We've been here for we were here last week too for TechEd, so they're complaining about the heat, and they're like, oh. And I'm like, no, in Hong Kong, it's actually hotter. So I've been prepared. They haven't been. Time to start?
Yes.
Awesome.
So welcome back, everybody. Our next session in the hall is led by Mr. Stephen Forte. Mr. Stephen is the Chief Strategic Officer of Telerik, a leading vendor in the .NET components. And he'll be speaking about building line of business applications with Silverlight 4.0.
No. Try again. That's the wrong session, right? This is the correct session, right? Who has a schedule? Now I'm paranoid. Who's here for Silverlight? Who's here for SQL Server R2? Who's just here for the jokes? Be honest. Okay, so good. So you're wrong, I'm right. I like that. Okay, I will be talking about Silverlight later. Actually, that's tomorrow, Silverlight line of business. Who's going to be here tomorrow? I do Silverlight at like 4:30, but it's not line of business. Okay, so I think if you just walked in, I just want to clear things up, is that SQL Server 2008 shipped in July of 2008, and right now in beta, and ship, I think, next month, maybe the month after, soon, very, very soon, SQL Server 2008 R2 will ship. Kind of like R2D2 is what I like to say. So it is an incremental upgrade which focuses mostly on business intelligence. There are some query enhancements, but then there's some developer features that I actually think we will enjoy, and I'm going to spend some time looking at. So by show of hands, who here is interested in T-SQL? Not that many. Haha, to the rest of you, because I'm going to show some T-SQL, but not too much. How many people here are developers and are interested in ways to, I don't know, collaborate with the DBA better? Okay, almost everyone. Great. And who here has users? Meaning, you know, your applications that have end users that have Excel on their machine. Wow, what do they have? What are you, like, running Linux and OpenOffice? Okay, let's try this again. How many people, raise your hand if you're here in this room? Okay, we've established you can raise your hand. I had to do this morning, remember? Okay, so how many people have end users that like to look at data in Excel? Not that many. Okay, so about a third, about half the room. So those are the things we're going to take a look at. So since, you know, there's all these marketing slides I can show you, but, you know, we're developers here, so we're not going to look at that. So since you have said you're interested, I think the most was for the developer features, we'll take a look at that first. And then we'll take a peek at a new feature called PowerPivot. Have you seen PowerPivot today? Was there a demo of PowerPivot? One person, two people? So some of it might see it for the first time. And then we'll take a look at some T-SQL enhancements. But to be honest with you, a lot of these T-SQL enhancements are carried over from SQL Server 2008. So they're not super new. So we'll save that to the end if we have time. As I said, mostly because we're going to look at the developer features. Okay. How many people here have Visual Studio on their machine? Excellent. Who has Visual Studio 2010? Oh, what's keeping you up? Visual Studio 2010, you can actually deploy to the previous versions of the framework. So it's good to use Visual Studio 2010, even if you're coding for .NET 3.5 or something like that. So this feature I'm going to show you, we're going to spend, you know, a good 10 or 15 minutes on this particular feature. This feature I like a lot. And what happens is I usually have the following problem. How many people go into their database, build a database on their own machine, and then they give a script to somebody to run? Okay, almost everyone. Now, how many people, now I'm grading this now on a curve, because not everyone raises their hand. So to me, that was 100%. So what happens is, have you ever given the script to the DBA or whoever it is, and it didn't work for some strange reason? Has that ever happened? What are some of the reasons why it didn't work? No one? Someone, shout out. I'll give you an iPhone. Yes? The database name has gotten changed, or the users aren't there. Okay, perfect example. Sometimes the environment isn't correct. You are coding with a particular service pack, and the production environment almost fell off the stage. That would be humorous. I'm confined to like half a meter, which those of you who see me speak before, that's not good. So a lot of times there might be some problems with deploying the actual application itself. And as you just said, there's a name conflict, or there's a user missing, or something like that. So how do we get around that? Well, you could use something called a database project, which was introduced in SQL Server 2008. However, in R2, there's a new feature called a data tier application. And that's what we're going to look at right now. A data tier application is actually very interesting. Let me actually just load one up, and then we can start talking about it. But what it does, it gives you the ability to create a database. And it gives you a lot of the robust features of Visual Studio. And you can build a database in Visual Studio. And you could do a lot of things with it, create your stored procedures, create your tables, all that other fun stuff. Then you can compile it, just the way you would compile an any old application. Once you compile it, you can then give the results of that compilation to a DBA. It's called a DAC pack. And it's really just a special zip file, but we don't care about that. And the DBA, or the person managing your database, can run that on their side, but it's not a script. The SQL Server instance will actually manage it for them. And that's the way you can keep your applications in sync. So then after you've deployed your application to the SQL Server, you have the ability to turn around and make changes on your end and give it to him or her. And then once the DBA has run it a second time, it will look for conflicts. And it will say, oh, wait a second, there's, as you said, the database name has changed or something like that. A really cool feature is in your DAC pack, you can turn around and say, I require SQL Server 2005 or higher. Or I require Service Pack 2 to be installed. Because you can then say, this DAC pack will give an error message if I try to run it. Who thinks that would be very helpful? No one. 5 people. Okay. So everyone else, close your eyes and sleep and pretend you're on top of Mount Kilimanjaro. And I am going to look for my SQL Server data tier application. So I've just went File New inside of Visual Studio 2010. This, as far as I know, it only works in Visual Studio 2010. And I'm going to choose a data tier application. So this is just another project template in, I'm clicking OK, and nothing's happening. Let's see. Oh, there we go. I just had to click OK a lot of times. A feature of, as I said, Visual Studio 2010. And you'll see over here on the side, we have a project. I know it's small, and I would hit, the Zoom button, but every time I hit Zoom in my VPC, sparks fly out of the hard drive, so we're not going to watch sparks fly out of my hard drive today. So you'll notice that the folders, I know you can't read it in the back, but the folders work with SQL Server schema type folders. You'll see here there's schema objects. Okay, there's nothing since this is a blank database. But it comes already with the DBO schema. When I say DBO schema, does everyone know what I'm talking about? More or less, right? DBO dot, perfect, just about everybody. So let's go ahead and create a table. It's always easy to create a table. So I'll just say add, there we go. I'm going to say add a table. And what should we make our table of? I know what we're going to make it of. Cricket teams. I've been watching the IPL. I have to admit is, oops, I spelled teams wrong, but that's okay. I will erase one of these here. I have to say that I was the typical American, years ago when someone would say cricket, and I'd say, oh, cricket's boring, they drink tea, all the things that you probably say about baseball. And I have to say last year when I was here for the conference, the Great Indian Developer Summit, and I stayed an extra week for doing some work, I was watching the IPL every night, and I got really interested in the IPL. So we will create a database that has, let's make it simple. We'll make any day now, team ID, and we'll make that an int, not null, and we'll also make team name. And we'll make this a varchar, or n varchar. And how long should a team name be? Let's say 15 characters. Easy enough. Okay, so, and we'll make this not null as well. I like to have fields required. So, we'll save this. Now we have a table called teams. And let's create another database object. I'm going to say add, and let's create a view. I know it's kind of silly to make a simple view, but I'm going to create a view, and I'm just going to say my teams. Okay. Those of you guys sitting there are some seats floating around. Anyone with an empty seat next to them, raise your hand. Okay, so you can sit with your friends in there. If you like sitting on the floor, that's okay by me. But if there's a fire, I will step on your head running out of the room. Okay, so let's just take the default view. Okay, so I'm just going to say select star from teams. Not much of a view, I know. You're probably supposed to do something more interesting with the view. But for now, we can make this our database, right? Do you understand the concept of what we're doing? We're creating the database here in Visual Studio instead of creating the database in SQL Management Studio. So this is targeting you, the .NET developer. Okay, if you're a DBA and you're here and you're like, this is horrible, don't worry. Continue using SQL Management Studio. This is for the developer and the developer experience. To prove to you that this is, for a developer experience, I'm going to find my mouse. There we go. I'm going to right-click on the project and say Properties. And somewhere, we will click on a link called Code Analysis. Now, you have this property in a C# project or a Visual Basic project, except that, there we go. I'm going to click on this button here, or I'm sorry, this checkbox that says Enable Code Analysis on Build. Straightforward, right? Click OK. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take advantage of some of the things that I'm used to inside of, inside of Visual Studio. So I'm going to build this project. And remember what I told you. If you can successfully compile the project, what happens is you're presented with something called a data tier application, or a DAC pack. Now, where am I here? I have build succeeded, which should not have happened, but let's pull this up here. You'll notice that set as a warning, okay? So the build passed, but I'm getting a warning. Now, I know you can't read the warning, so I will read it to you. It says Microsoft.rules.data. The shape of the result produced by a select star statement will change if the underlying table or view structure changes. So what it's telling me is, as a best practice, I should never say select star, which is true. So I'm going to click on this error message. I'm going to double click, just like you would do if you got a warning in a C# project, and it brings me to where I was. So I'm now going to click on here. I'm going to hit data, and I'm going to say refactor, and I'm going to say fully qualify names. Oops, that's not exactly what I want to do. I'm going to do that in 1 second. I'm going to say data, dun, dun, dun. I'm going to say refactor. And I'm going to say expand wildcards. So what it's going to do is, just like in SQL Server, you can see that it has, it gives me a preview of my change. And it's highlighted the star. And let's see if it did what it was supposed to do. There we go. So it's actually refactored for me. So I actually could take advantage of the Visual Studio built-in refactoring tools. Okay, now we can't see this completely, so I'll just, since I made the font big for the people in the back, specifically the guys who turned on the air conditioning, they're far in the back. So you'll see now that I have, I've actually put select team ID and select team name as opposed to select star, which is good because if we add a column later, we won't run into that potential naming conflict. So I'm going to save that. I actually, when I accidentally clicked on the refactoring one before that said fully qualified names, I actually like to have fully qualified names, which means don't have, I like to have DBO dot. And believe it or not, I've run into some strange issues. And I've confirmed this with the SQL Server team. Well, the guy's not on the team anymore. His name is Paul Randall. And I had a really, really, really highly transactional database, like 20 to 30 transactions per second. And I was adding billions of rows to this table every week. And if I didn't have a fully qualified name, my query plan would slow down. I know that's kind of crazy, and I'm sure the bug is fixed, but I just like to explicitly state, DBO dot, just so there's no namespace conflicts. So I can use the refactoring tools for that. So I hit Save All, and now I'm going to build it again. So I'll just say Rebuild Solution, and that error message should go away. Or at least it's not an error message, it's a yellow warning, and you'll see the warning has went away. So you can see we've as a developer, you're familiar. Everyone used the code analysis for your C# and VB projects? Okay, not as many as I thought, only maybe about 10 people. Anyone use the refactoring tools? Much more people use the refactoring, yeah, okay. So in essence, if you're familiar with code analysis and the refactoring, we now have that experience when we're building our database. Okay, so it's bringing that the experience that we enjoy as a C# programmer or a VB programmer into our environment. I'm going to click over here on the output, and I don't see any output. I'm sure if I scroll up, there we go. You don't need to worry about this, but here is where it's telling me where my stuff is, right? It's telling you where the bin folder is, so I'm just going to copy and paste that. So don't worry about the actual physical, what I'm doing here. I'm just copy and pasting a file path because I have no idea where this project is. Apparently it's in users, copy, users administration, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I'm now just going to paste that file path into my folder here. Click Enter. And this is the result of my actual, let me just expand here. This is the result of my doing my compilation. You'll see that the first file is a file of type Microsoft SQL Server DAC package file. And what that means is my schema is wrapped up into this particular file in a format that SQL Server understands. Okay? In reality, it's just a zip file. And if I double-click it, it might even pop it open, which is, I know the Mr. Microsoft guy is going to yell at me in the front of the room. You're not supposed to do this, right? But you can see I can actually unpack it and look at it as a zip file. And it's just going to have T-SQL scripts. So in essence, there's not a huge change with what you do, right? Meaning you build scripts and you hand it off to a DBA, except when you build a script, don't you tell them when they phone you up, or I guess they instant message or phone you, right? And they say, how come your script doesn't work? And you say, did you run it in order? Right? Run this for, some people are laughing. So you've obviously had that problem recently, right? So, I got to run this step, then that step. Oh, yeah, and then this step, and then that step. This DAC pack is what this is called. Takes care of all of that for you. So let's take a look at it in action. I'm going to go into SQL Server. And this is Management Studio, which I'm sure you're familiar with to some extent. Let's not worry about the code, because this is for other demos later on. So let's just look at our Object Explorer. And I know it might be a little difficult to see in the back. I try my hardest to make things bigger. But I'll just walk you through what it is if you can't see in the back rows. I'm clicking on the Management tab. So when you go into SQL Server, Management Studio, you see databases, security, logins, right? And in this particular case, I'm clicking on Management. And usually the stuff that's here is like the resource governor and the transaction coordinator. But in SQL Server 2008 R2, there's a new one called Data Tier Applications. And what Data Tier Applications is you can import one of the DAC packs that a developer has created. So I'm going to put my DBA hat on. How many people here are DBAs? Want to come up and demo? How many people here are developers? How many people here are both? Not as many as I thought. Usually it's growing more and more where people are doing both. So if you're both, I suggest getting a hat or a T-shirt that says developer, and a hat and a T-shirt that says DBA, and you can put one on and take the other off when you're doing different things. I was going to try to make hats to do that and put my DBA hat on, put my developer hat on, but I went to the store in Hong Kong and they didn't know how to do it. I was like, you can't make me a hat? So I'm like, this is China. Like, they make everything here. You can't make me a hat? So I right-clicked on the data tier application, and the first option, I know you might not be able to see it if you're not down on the front, says Deploy Data Tier Application. So I'm going to click on that, and a wizard is going to fire up. So this is the deploy a data tier application wizard. So remember, in Visual Studio, we just created a database. That database exists nowhere except kind of in memory inside of my Visual Studio. So I'm going to deploy a data tier application. I'm going to click Next. And it's going to tell me, where is this DAC pack? Well, that's why I copied and pasted the file name. So we can look for it here. So database 5. Okay, so I'm just deploying that DAC pack. And you're going to see it has application name and version number. I could have set all of this stuff in Visual Studio. I was lazy and didn't. Okay. But you can go into Visual Studio and give your DAC pack version. If you don't, it will automatically increment the minor version once for you. And we can try to upgrade our database later. Give it a name of database 5. That's the name of my solution. Okay? I could have changed that as well. I was lazy and did not. I'm sure you can appreciate my laziness. So I hit Next. And what it's doing is something that I think is pretty cool, is it went in and validated the actual DAC pack itself. Okay? And you might think, well, this is silly. Hey, Steve, Visual Studio produced the DAC pack. Another Microsoft product is reading the DAC pack. But at some point in the future, SQL Server might have a new service pack, or Visual Studio might have a service pack, and formats might change, so it has to validate the DAC pack. So it's giving me the opportunity to change the name of my database in SQL Server. So I'm going to call this IPL stuff. Okay? And here is the path of where it's going to go. If you know anything about SQL Server, there is an MDF, an LDF file, the MDF for the data, the LDF for the transaction log. I prefer to put them in different locations, one on a RAID 5, one on a RAID 1, but since I have a very small laptop, it's going here. But I do have a solid-state hard drive, so actually, no, I'm running it off of VPC, so it's running on this thing. Okay, and that's it. So now it's like, okay, we could run this. So I'll click Next. And it's going through its little wizard. Since we didn't have much, the wizard went pretty quickly. But presumably speaking, you would have created a much larger application than just one table and one view. You probably would have created 2 or 3 tables minimum, and maybe 1 or 2 views, maybe some stored procedures. So it would go in here and run them all, and success or fail. So I'll click Finish. Now, let's go into databases. As I said, I know this is small. I apologize, but I'll click on databases. You'll see I have a database here called IPL stuff. So I'm going to click on IPL stuff. And as once again, I apologize for the size. But I right-click. I'm going to say New Query. Dun, dun, dun. And a new T-SQL window will open. But if I click on tables, you'll see I have the teams table. If we click on views, I should have my view, right, my teams, right? And I can go over here and say something like select star from teams or my view or something like that. Even though I just lectured you on how you should never do select star, but that's okay. Okay, so one of the things we can do, wow, that's just like going, this has 3.5, this machine has 8 gigs of RAM, and it's 64 bits, so it's using the 8 gigs of RAM. And I've done all the tricks to make a VPC fast. So it's just, I don't know, it's on vacation. It's looking, this is actually a beta version of the next version of SQL Server, SQL Server Beach Edition, right? It's laying on the beach having some fun. So, which I would like it to do. So select star from teams, we should have nothing there, right? Team ID. So let's do a quick insert statement. And I will show you a new little T-SQL feature. Oh, go away, go away. Sometimes sound effects works when you're desperate. I don't want to just unpin that because if I do, I have some problems. Okay, there we go. Go away. There we go. We should all clap every time it goes away. Okay, so I'm going to show you a quick little T-SQL trick. I'm going to say, what is it, values? I'm going to say, what was the first thing? Team ID was an int, so I'll just say 1, and then we'll give a team name, the Royals, my favorite team. And the reason why the Royals are my favorite team is my first time watching cricket, they won the championship. So, and then of course they have the best cheerleaders, but you didn't hear that from me. Okay, so but the Royals are out now. So if you've been following me on Facebook, I've been whining and complaining. I was here in Bangalore last week, and we were at a bar, and the Royals were playing the Royal Challenge, local. And, I'm rooting for the Royals in this Bangalore bar, and everyone's giving me dirty looks, like, you stupid American. What are you doing here? And then like the whole bar, and there was a karaoke bar, so we were singing. I sang Like a Virgin. And what happened was at the end, the Bangalore, I mean, just like it got sad. It was like they needed a mercy rule. So at one point they needed like 25 runs per over to win. I mean, something ridiculous, something like impossible. So I'm like, I need a mercy rule, but there's no mercy rule. So the Royals are out. Real briefly, sidebar, I'm going to show you a brand new feature of SQL Server 2008. You can do multiple inserts on the same line. It's just a little T-SQL shortcut. So team 2, and we'll call it the Royal Challenge. Boo hiss, I don't like them. And then I'll do team 3. We'll just add maybe one more team. The Knight Riders, just because they're out too. Might as well give them some love. We'll do one more. We'll do for the Mumbai Indians. Oops. How many times do you like hearing me say oops? Okay, so as my machine catches up, you'll notice this is just a new little feature of SQL Server 2008 where you can do multiple insert statements on the same line. It saves me a lot of typing. There's a lot of little shortcuts like this. Oh, everyone's interested in T-SQL all of a sudden. When I asked before, like 2 hands went up. I will show more shortcuts like this at the end. We're almost done with this demo. I'll show you PowerPivot, and then at the very end, I'll show you maybe 1 or 2 more if we have time. 1 or 2 more like this. 5. And I now should have 5 records, or 4 records added to the database. There we go, 4 rows affected. So let us go back, cancel this. Let us go back into Visual Studio. And I think one of the things that we can do in Visual Studio is if I go here to Data, and I say Transact SQL Editor, I say New Query Connection. You'll notice a very familiar dialog comes up. Okay, right? So this can connect to SQL Server. And I'm going to connect over here. And you'll notice if I just click over here, this line here, this toolbar, which just went away, but this toolbar is actually the same toolbar as in SQL Server. And you'll notice I have all of my tables. I can hit IPL stuff, and I could say select star from teams. I can't hit F5. If I hit F5, what happens? I compile the application, right? So if you're a big SQL geek like me, you have to actually hit the little button over here. And of course, I spelled from wrong. Maybe, do I have spell check? No. That's a feature request, Mr. Microsoft. I want spell check. I have to give you some full disclosure. I am like what they call a SQL Server insider or whatever they call it. So, well, not anymore. And here's why. So SQL Server 2005, which was like the big upgrade, right? We waited 6 years, not 5, from SQL Server 2000 to 2005. They lied to us. Right? SQL Server 2005 shipped November of 1999. SQL Server 2005 shipped November of 2005. That's 6, not 5. Anyway, so when SQL Server 2002 was being planned, that was the original name for it, I was flown out to Redmond, Washington, Microsoft's global headquarters. And they said to me, Steve, tell us what you want to see in this next version of SQL Server. And I said, when I log into, Query Analyzer, or whatever we call this thing, right, over here, I said, SQL Server should just know what database I want to be in. How many people have in their master database like 100 stored procedures that shouldn't be in there? Come on, admit it. We're friends here. The door is closed. Who here is sitting next to their boss? Only one person? So everyone other than that guy. Who has consistently been in the wrong database and made a boo-boo? Okay, there we go. So I said to them, to prevent that, you should just know what database I want to be in. I said, well, how do we do that, Steve? When you log in, should you specify? No, I said, no, it should just know what database I want to be in. Like, I want to be in the IPL stuff database. I said, Steve? I said, yes. I said, SQL Server cannot read your mind. I said, oh. I said, scratch that idea. So they stopped inviting me. I wonder why. Okay, so back to our database. So you can see we have a fully functional T-SQL editor. Well, let's go in and change our database around a little bit. Okay, forget the view. I've given the view no love. I'm sorry. We'll go back to the teams here. Let's just add a column to this table. I don't know, team owner. That's another reason why I like the Royals. I always say, so it's funny when let's say 50 characters for an owner, and we could say it could be nullable, and we'll save that. So I've now made a change to my database. Let's build this. Dun, dun, dun. Rebuild solution. And it looks like everything succeeded. It says rebuild all succeeded. I'm going to copy and paste again my location. Actually, I have it open here, but the location, okay, right? We just timestamped it to 5:21 p.m., which was just a couple seconds ago, or at least it's 5:21 p.m. in Hong Kong. It's not that here. So let's go now back into our management studio. So the scenario we just did was that SQL Server 2008, right? You've made a change to your application. So I'm going to go back to my data tier application. Instead of running a script against my database, we're going to let SQL Server manage this change for you. Unfortunately, last time I did this, this completely crashed my system. It is a beta. Don't blame me. Blame Microsoft. It's easier. I'm going to say upgrade data tier application. So what's it doing? It already manages the IPL stuff database for us. So now I've made a change in Visual Studio. So now I can go in and run this. The cool thing about this is you can actually run this in multiple, you can run this against multiple databases even, right? So you can have multiple copies of this database in different places. Database 5, it still says version 1.0, which I don't like. So let me go back here and recompile one more time. I'm going to say, let's say, build solution. I don't know why I didn't pick up that change. So let's do that. And let me go in. That looks good. Let me just go in and database.sql settings. Oh, those are all like the database settings. I was looking for a quick property where I can change my actual thing here. So that still says 521. Let's just run this again, even though it's 523. I guess because nothing has changed. So I'm going to assume that we're OK. But let's go back into our management studio. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to upgrade the data tier application. So I'll go through, click OK. There's my path. Click on the file. Click on database 5. Any day now. Hit next. And what it's doing now, and this is very important, is it's saying, what's different with the application? Is it incompatible? Are you using data types that doesn't happen? And I've made a change to the actual application. So it's actually, it says right here, detecting change. This may take a few minutes. So it's actually detected that I've made a change, right? We've added that column, okay? Though it says it's detected a change, but that the database IPL stuff has not changed, which is interesting. But we'll run that. And it looks like some reason for some reason my machine is a little slow here, but let's see what's happening. It's validating the upgrade. It's running. You'll see there's a lot more steps. And this is the last piece of our demo. What this is actually doing is creating a full backup of the IPL stuff database and versioning that backup. And then it's deploying the changes to the production database. So I'm actually going to have two databases. Oh, maybe not, because I've had some problems, which we could ignore. We can close our eyes and pretend this worked. I'm going to probably blame me. There's probably something I made a mistake on. But that's what it will normally do, is we'll actually go in and create a separate database, and it will back up your current database, so you can actually roll back. And let's say you update 4 or 5 versions, you can actually roll back to those other databases. It actually creates the database in SQL Server. So it's just another database with an underscore and a timestamp and version stamp, okay? Which I actually see one here. Even though it said it didn't do it, okay? I know you can't really see it that well, but this one says IPL stuff underscore, and then the underscores give us 1000, which was the version name, and then it looks like a timestamp. And you'll notice I have tables and views and all that other fun stuff. And then I have my IPL stuff database here, right? So it's actually, though I did get some errors when I deployed it, so we won't look at all those particular errors. So that is, as I said, I wanted to spend some time on that because that is probably one of the features that you as a developer or care about the most. So what I'm going to do actually is switch gears. I'm going to close out of Visual Studio. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to close out of this as well. And what I'm going to do is focus on a completely different feature. Okay, so remember I said we're going to talk about 3 things. Well, 2 things, 2.5 things. One was the data tier applications. Okay. The next feature I'm going to talk about is something called SQL Server Power Pivot. And one person said they had a demo of this. So My machine went away. So I'm going to pull up Microsoft Excel. So this is probably the second most interesting feature for a developer. Is I asked before how many people have users that like to work with Excel, and everyone kind of rose their hand. And there's now a feature of Excel called PowerPivot. It's actually an add-on into Excel. I'm using the beta version. I know Office just shipped like yesterday, so I don't have the most current version of Office, but that's okay. I just have I have the beta version, and it's telling me that it's okay. So what happens is SQL Server Power Pivot is an add-in either for Excel and actually for SharePoint. We're going to look at Excel. That gives users the ability to connect to a database, and this is pretty interesting. So hopefully I'll explain it properly. So you could connect to the database, download the data into Excel, but it stores it in a very compressed format, and I mean a very compressed format. Okay? Then what it will do is after you have the data downloaded, in memory, you can build OLAP, I won't say OLAP cubes, but OLAP-style cubes that can power charts and pivot tables. But it's severed. You sever your connection from the database, and then you have the ability to make these in memory, and it works extremely fast. Even on this slow machine, it will work extremely fast. So the users can build what we call self-service business intelligence. So the users can connect to the database, presumably to views that you've created for them, or maybe some schema you've created for them. They'll download data, or you can show them how to do that. And then they can go in and build pivot tables on the fly. And these pivot tables uses something called the VisiCalc engine, which is it's actually not the exact name for it. I'm confusing it with something else. But there is an engine inside of Excel which actually runs cubes in memory on the user's desktop. And the beautiful thing about it works on tablet PCs even. It works on low-powered laptops. And the user can use it without an internet connection. They can use it on an airplane because the data is stored in the Excel spreadsheet. So let me just spend 5 minutes doing a demo of this, and then we'll spend the last 5 minutes or so looking at some of the T-SQL enhancements. So if you missed what I did real quick, is I went to the Power Pivot window. Let me actually show you what I did while this is loading. In Excel, in the ribbon, I clicked on Power Pivot. And this only shows up if you download the PowerPivot plugin. And the PowerPivot plugin is available for free, but it only works, as far as I know, for Excel 2010. There's a 32-bit version and a 64-bit version. This particular one, for your interest, is the 32-bit version. And I clicked on the Launch the PowerPivot window, which brings up the PowerPivot window. And the PowerPivot window allows you to connect to databases such as SQL Server. Lets you connect to Microsoft Access. It lets you connect to OLAP cubes and analysis services, or any other OLADB, I won't say OLADB, any other .NET namespace compatible database, right? So if you have the MySQL driver installed or the Oracle driver installed, things like that. You can also connect to files. You can connect to text files. You can connect to XML files. You can connect to Excel. And actually, my favorite, which I will not be talking about here at the Indian Developer Summit, you can connect to data feeds. And I talk a lot about OData, which is the format for Microsoft Data Services. And you can actually connect to data feeds or RSS-style feeds from your actual Power Pivot. And it's heterogeneous, meaning is I could connect customers from Oracle, and I could connect orders from a feed. I can connect order details from a text file, right? Because when I say it's heterogeneous, it comes into PowerPivot, and you can define the relationships. Since I'm importing from a database, PowerPivot will probably define the relationship for us, but I'll quickly show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to run the wizard, and this is just your standard kind of SQL Server authentication, authorization scheme here. So I'm just going to click on the local database, and I'm going to just go to Northwind, because if you know me, you know I like Northwind. Notice I have 400 versions of AdventureWorks. That's because there's like 400 different versions of AdventureWorks. So to punish Microsoft and their complexity, I always use Northwind. Okay, so I'll click on Northwind. Plus, Northwind is easy. Customers, orders, order details, all that fun stuff. So it says select a list of tables and views to choose data to import, or you can provide a SQL statement. Okay, I'm going to pretend I'm an end user and I don't know what I'm doing with what's the SQL thing. So I'm going to click on that box, say just give me a list of tables. And we'll just pull in customers, order, and order detail because that's the easiest, right? So customers, orders, order details. That looks good. Let's pull in shippers too. And maybe even products. What the heck? I'll click Finish. So what this will do now is actually go in and import the data. And it should be done momentarily. And what it's going to do, completed, hit close. It's going to bring us to the screen, and you'll see we now have all of our database tables here as tabs here in Excel. And if you'll notice, I'm in the orders table. Okay, right? I'm going to click on products. I'll click on shippers. You'll notice that in my orders table, it has customers, right? And you'll see here, there's a little different icon. I know it's virtually impossible to see in the back, but it's telling me that there's a relationship between customers and the order details table. I'm sorry, in the orders table. I could create, in this particular case, the employee ID. I can right-click and say create a relationship. If I had another table in there that contained all the employees, right? So if I could actually go in and import that from a text file, or I can use a different Excel spreadsheet if I had one. I don't have one here. I could type one in, but we only have 10 more minutes to go, so let's not do that. But you understand what I'm saying is that you can actually define these types of relationships for the user. The nice thing is, since we've imported this from a database, it's done it for us automatically. Now here's the thing. I have no idea where I saved this file, but if I right-clicked on it, it'd be like 100K. It has, I don't know how it does this compression, but they should write a letter to like the WinZip people and say, here's our compression algorithm. And it would do the world a lot of good, because these spreadsheets take in all this text data, and I've imported almost like 1 million rows. And it's been, just like, 200-300K. It's been really, really small. Excel is trying to talk to me, and it's trying to save the database. Let's save it to the desktop. And remind me at the end, we can look up how big it is when we're done playing with this. So let's just make something pretty simple. So I'm the user. I'd like to create a pivot table. And I'm not an expert in pivot tables, but I'm going to just create a real simple pivot table just to get started so you can understand the concept of what this does. So I'm going to click OK. And hopefully it will fire up. So now on the right-hand side, I have a task pane. And this particular task pane gives me the ability to drag and drop and create my pivot table on the fly. So I'm going to create a pivot table of customers. Yes, I like customers. So I'm going to put company name, and that's going to be a row label. And you can see all the company names come up. I'm also going to pull in, let's say, order details or orders. Let's pull in the shipping. So the freight cost, right? Freight. So you'll notice down here, there are all these boxes. Okay, and I'll explain what those boxes are. But your end user is actually what's going to build this. That is my measure, okay, if you were at my data warehousing session this morning, meaning it's going to summarize how much this customer has spent on freight. Okay? And that's one of the things a pivot table can do. But let's actually get a little more fancy. Let us pull in from the shippers table, okay, the name of the shipping company. So I'll just do a slicer. Horizontal is this way, right? A slicer horizontal. And you'll notice what it's going to do is it's going to go get all the shipping companies, and it's going to give me a filtering box if my machine catches up, which hopefully it will. And maybe I could stop there. Notice on the bottom it says in really, really small letters, it says running OLAP query. Okay? And it actually runs, it's literally creating a cube on the fly for you. It's literally what it's doing in memory in Excel. So actually, let's just take a look at what this has done. I can click on this, and it tells me, these are all the customers that work with Speedy Express. These are the customers that work only with federal shipping. These are the ones with United Package. Okay? I'll create one last thing. I'll take the country name, and we can kind of bring the country in. Country, there we go. And I actually wanted to switch the country on the top. And now I actually can have I'm starting to get a pivot table, okay? Right? I could spend another 5 minutes and build a pivot table, but that is not what we as developers do, right? We very rarely create these pivot tables. The users create the pivot table. Okay? So this is a feature that is geared towards user. It's going to be up to us as the developer to build the queries for them that they would actually go and connect to. Okay? I'm going to stop here with PowerPivot, even though I would love to show more. But I did promise, I think I have about 5 minutes to go. I did promise I'll show you one or two more little quick T-SQL tidbits. And some of these aren't really even super new. One or two of these were from SQL Server 2008, but I just want to show you a couple of them. Okay, so first thing first is we had our good friend, I showed you the multiple inserts, right, in the last example. This is one of the things I like because, I'm going to be honest with you, it reminds me of C#. Okay, and these are one or two of the things I want to show you. I'm declaring a variable and giving it a value on the same line, okay, which you couldn't do in the past. So here I'm declaring the @MSFT variable. I'm giving it the value of MSFT, okay? So I'm actually declaring a variable, and I'm assigning its value on the same line. Just saves a little bit of typing, saves a little bit of confusion, okay? Let me get out of my master DB. See, SQL Server should just know what database I want to be in, right? So I'm just going to create a little database real quick. I have just less than 5 minutes. I can show you 2 or 3 more little shortcuts. And the one I want to show you is, it already exists. Great. So let's use my DB, which means all of my things are probably already in there, which is fine. So we're in my DB. So I have a table called portfolio, trade symbol. This particular demo shows you what I did before. It's the shortcut for inserting. But that's not what we want to look at. This is what I want to show you. So this is probably the most requested feature for T-SQL by C# developers and even VB developers is the plus equals, right? Just like in C#. I now have the ability to go plus equals to increment the value that already exists, right? So in this particular case, where my symbol is MSFT, so let's actually just quick look at the portfolio table, okay? I click on portfolio, and it doesn't exist. Of course, it doesn't exist. So let's just run that real quick. I'll create these tables, and I'll run that. And then I'll add some data to these tables, and I'll run that. And once that's done, I'm just going to let's just look at the portfolio table real briefly. And you'll see Microsoft here has 100 shares. I'm now going to say the quantity is the current value plus 55. Okay, right, so let's just run that real quick. And it's a nice little shortcut. And now if we look at the portfolio table again, we should see 155 for Microsoft, which I'm pretty sure, I know it's a little hard to see because it's at the very bottom of the screen. And that's not helping either. Okay. So one other thing is the date time features have changed. And SQL Server 2008 introduced these and have actually been kind of fixed a little better in R2. So in this particular case, we have a date time, which is a bigger time. It could actually go back much further. Instead of I think 1500 was where SQL Server fell. Now you can go to year 0, right? So you can literally track, if you're doing scientific applications that are doing carbon dating and things like that, you can go really far back using intrinsic date time variables. The other thing here is a time zone offsets, which are actually really nice. So if you're storing data, you don't have to have a separate column for the time zone. You can actually just use the offset, and it's pretty straightforward. Meaning is you have to use the date time offset data type, but then you just provide where it is from GMT. Okay, so in this particular case, we're minus 5. If we wanted to do plus plus 5.5, right? It would be 530. India's plus 530 from GMT. So then you can have time zone aware data. It doesn't really handle daylight savings well. So you just have to compensate for that, read the system variable, and take it from there. So some good stuff with the dates. One quick thing I want to show you, and then I do have to wrap it up, is a merge statement. And this was actually introduced with SQL Server 2008 and enhanced with SQL Server 2008 R2. This is used to keep 2 tables in sync. And what you could do is you could actually merge the contents of 2 particular tables. So, excuse me. This particular case is going to look at the portfolio table and the trade table. And what we're going to do is the portfolio table, the portfolio table is our target. The trade table is our source. And what we're going to do is on our symbol column, which is the primary key of both tables, it's going to look row by row and see if there are changes. Meaning is if in the trade table you have deleted a record, so if it does not exist in the trade table and it does exist in the portfolio table, it will just delete it for you. And you have to write the code to do that, and I'll show you that in a second. If it exists in both tables but is different, it will overwrite the value in the target table with the value from the source table. And if it doesn't exist at all in the target table, it will do an insert. Now, in the past, you had to do 3 passes of your table to complete this operation. Here, we only do 1 pass, and it's done by this particular merge table. Meaning is, I've merged, and I have my where statement here, and basically is if it's matched, but they're not there, I can actually delete it. If it's matched, I can update the quantity. Okay, in this particular case, I'm saying update the portfolio. I'm using my plus equal sign. If it's not matched, I do an insert. And in this particular case, I'm doing the insert of the actual values. And you terminate your merge statement with a semicolon. So we can run this. I know I went through this quick. This is used mostly with data warehousing. However, I think it's not limited just to data warehousing. I think we can use this in multiple scenarios. The nice thing about merge is it keeps 2 tables in sync while only really performing the operations on 1 pass through the database. So those are a handful of some T-SQL expressions that have kind of changed. So hopefully we've gotten a good overview of where, I already closed my PowerPoint. Hopefully you got a good awareness of the overview of what SQL Server 2008 R2 brings to the developer. I think the biggest developer feature, obviously, is the data tier application. And then I think, obviously, the next one you're going to be interested in, of course, is PowerPivot and bringing that functionality to your users. There's been a lot of updates on the BI side as well. And then there's been a handful of just incremental features along the way. So there's my email ID and my website and my blog and all that other fun stuff. I have to end the session because we're out of time. Thank you for coming.